Online to Calgary here at the heart of the land of the Treaty 7 peoples. Looks like the cold snap is breaking, at least for a little while, but I'm not expecting a lot of warmth from the provincial government right at this moment. This week, we go back to the legislature. We go back to the legislature at a time when a lot of Albertans are feeling heavy. There's a lot going on. The cost of living crisis continues to make it harder and harder for people to live here. Since the legislature last met, the healthcare system, particularly emergency rooms across this province, have collapsed. 100 days after the end of the teacher strike, there's no improvement in public education. People are feeling less safe on the streets. So Albertans just expect us, and they rightly expect us, to return to the legislature to thoughtfully debate, to enact new laws that will make a difference for Albertans in the best interests of the province. Spoiler alert. Under Danielle Smith and the UCP, that is not going to happen. This government doesn't act on the things that matter to Albertans. In fact, it's fair to say that Danielle Smith never does anything in the best interest of Albertans. She does everything in the best interest of Danielle Smith and her political survival. And that's all we hear from this government over and over and over again. So I challenge every Albertan to ask yourselves, is your life better than it was 6 years ago when the UCP took power? Is your life better than it was 3.5 years ago when Danielle Smith became Premier? It's fair to say that almost every aspect of life in Alberta under the control of the provincial government has gotten demonstrably worse since this government came into power. Cost of living is out of control. On Saturday, I happened to be driving by Whitehorn Station in northeast Calgary, and I saw in the bitter, bitter cold hundreds of people. I later learned over 4,000 people over the course of the afternoon, standing in the bitter cold with shopping bags and blankets. So I stopped my car and got out to see what was going on. I never dressed for the weather, so I wasn't really dressed for it. But what I realized was this was the great volunteers of the Guru Nanak Free Kitchen. They now serve 3,000 to 4,000 Calgarians every single weekend. 1/3 of Calgarians in the richest jurisdiction in the country, don't have enough to eat. They're food insecure every month. Just down the street, of course, is the Peter Lougheed Hospital. A hospital whose emergency rooms were supposed to have been expanded years ago. Those new rooms still haven't opened. Those new triage physicians promised over Christmas still haven't come. And the emergency room still doesn't work. So when it comes to healthcare, cost of living, education, the economy, Albertans' lives are not getting any better. But at least the Conservatives can tell you they're good at managing the budget. But they're lousy at managing the budget. 3 days from now, we will get a budget that will shock us all. It will shock us all in terms of the deficit, in terms of the misplaced priorities, in terms of the priorities that the Premier simply does not share with any Albertans. When the Premier first got into her job, she said she would follow in the footsteps of Ralph Klein. That if she made a mistake, she'd apologize and she'd move on. This Premier has never apologized for anything. She hasn't apologized for the corruption in the healthcare and procurement systems that we've outlined, hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts going to UCP friends. She hasn't apologized for the true harm that she's caused in targeting group after group and taking away their human rights. She never apologizes for anything. Instead, she blames. For years, everything was Justin Trudeau's fault. She blamed it all on Ottawa. Well, Justin Trudeau's not the Prime Minister anymore, and she's desperately trying to find an alliance with Mark Carney to create the Carney-Smith alliance, so she's got to find someone else to blame. For a while, she was blaming educators. She blamed doctors. And now she's found a new scapegoat. She's blaming immigrants. She now says all the problems in Alberta, her failures in healthcare and education, the unemployment rate in Alberta, are all due to newcomers, immigrants, and temporary foreign workers. We know that they're due to this government's mismanagement of their own finances. The Premier never thinks about the implications of her political ideology, her college Republican conversations, her Trumpism on real people. This week, one of the most prominent Calgarians, the greatest Canadian football player, John Cornish, and I'll underline the greatest Canadian football player, was accosted on the streets downtown. He's a big guy, and he was accosted on the streets downtown being told to go back to his effing country. This happens every single day in Danielle Smith's Alberta. And these are the implications that Danielle Smith's actions have on every single human being in Alberta. It's extraordinary hypocrisy. 2 years ago, the Premier said she wanted to double the population of Alberta. She wanted Red Deer to increase by 10 times to become a city of 1 million people. Then she tells us she read on Twitter that there were too many immigrants. She literally said that, folks. And now, suddenly, she's following the tune of, there are too many immigrants. The Alberta Calling Program is still paying people bonuses to come here. Yet the government never seemed to understand that people don't come with schools and teachers and doctors when they move here. And their failure to plan is the absolute failure of this government. It's not the fault of the people coming here. And will Alberta get any better once we have a referendum on these 9 questions the Premier has brought up? Is it going to reduce the cost of living? Is spending $100 million or more on a referendum going to hire any doctors? None of this is going to make life any better for any of us. This exercise is simply about distraction after distraction after distraction to avoid talking about how bad the Conservatives are with money, how bad they are with the budget, how bad they are with the economy. Multi-billion-dollar deficits after years in power. It's worth thinking back a little bit. Danielle Smith has increased government spending at double the speed of Rachel Notley. In 2 years, she increased spending by more than Rachel Notley did in 4 years. Rachel Notley did that because oil was $15 a barrel. Danielle Smith cannot balance the budget with oil at $70 a barrel. And oh, by the way, Rachel Notley was busy building schools, cutting poverty in half, building infrastructure that we needed. While Danielle Smith does nothing but pad the UCP's friends' pockets and waste precious tax dollars at a time when oil revenue is high. When oil production is at record levels, she still can't balance the budget because they're very, very bad with money. They don't know what they're doing. That's why we're talking about separatism and immigrants and constitutional questions that will never go anywhere and ridiculous referenda. That's why we spent millions of dollars on the completely ridiculous Alberta Next panels, because these are distractions from her own faults and her own mismanagement. Will we be any better off because of these referenda? Absolutely not. But Alberta's New Democrats will continue to fight for you. As we move into this next section, into this next session of the legislature, we will cut the BS. My deputy leader will say that a little more bluntly than I will, because Albertans are tired of it. Albertans are tired of all this fakery. Albertans are tired of a government that doesn't want to govern. We will stay focused on healthcare, because our hospitals and ERs are in crisis. Frontline workers are ringing the alarm. 1 million Albertans don't have a family doctor. Albertans are dying while waiting for care. They're dying in waiting rooms, and their quality of life is suffering while they live in pain waiting for surgery. We can fix it. The UCP cannot. We'll keep fighting to find ways that government can make life more affordable by attacking insurance rates, utilities, grocery bills, and everything else that's making life so difficult for so many families. We'll take every opportunity we can to stand up for Canada, to denounce separatism, and to proudly fly the Canadian flag as proud Albertans and proud Canadians. We're better together, we're stronger together, and we proudly fly the flag to fight back against this separatist rhetoric that's expensive, that makes life more expensive, and that threatens to tear us apart. By the way, not one single UCP member has signed a simple pledge that says that they're a proud Canadian. Every single one of us has. Peter Guthrie didn't sign the pledge, the independent MLA, but he certainly is a proud Canadian. Why is it so hard for the UCP just to say that? Because again, they love the distraction, and they love the drama. And Albertans deserve so much more than distraction and drama. Alberta's New Democrats are listening to every Albertan. My caucus and I are ready to bring real leadership to the game and really focus on the things that Albertans care about. Enough is enough. We're tired of this. All Albertans are tired of this. We deserve a better government. The UCP has shown they are not capable of being that better government. So if they can't, or they won't, address the issues that are really important to Albertans, we will, and we're ready. Happy to go to questions.
Thank you. All my those in the room, if you have a question, come right up to the mic, and for those online, to use the raise hand function to get into the question queue. We'll start with questions in the room.
Hi, Kevin from the CTV News. I know we're a little ahead of the curve on this, given your press conference here at 10 this morning. But in about an hour and a half, Daniel Smith and Adriana LaGrange are holding a press conference, and the title of it is addressing or will announce record-breaking investments in physicians.
How nice. This is the 10th or 12th time that they've made record-breaking announcements in healthcare. They've been in power for 6 years. They've broken the healthcare system. We now have 11 agencies, each with their own CEOs, each with their own management structure, sucking resources away from the front line because Danielle's got paid at AHS. It's not working. We've had stories of people dying in waiting rooms in the emergency room. 1 million Albertans don't have a family doctor or nurse practitioner. And they've done nothing to address it. They're going to throw some money at it, sure. They'll throw a few bucks here and there. We'll never know where that money went. We'll never know if those people got hired. And they will tell us that we have more doctors in Alberta than we've ever had. What they don't tell us is that includes the number that have retired, that have closed their practices, that are working part-time, or that have left the province but still come back from time to time to do locums. What they don't tell us is we have far fewer physicians per capita, per person, than we had before. So I welcome the fact that they've woken up to the fact that there's not enough doctors. I have zero confidence that they will be able to fix this situation when people don't want to work in the Alberta healthcare system because it's in such chaos.
As follow then, what would you or your government, should you ever form one, do to change them?
So the first thing is, it starts with respect for the people working in the system, listening to them, understanding their ideas, and treating them with respect. So one of my MLAs, Dr. Luann Metz, who is a world-renowned urologist, I've actually asked her to spend the last 2 years really talking to experts here and around the world and talking to people in the system to develop a blueprint for a futurized healthcare system, one that works, that provides the services when people need it. And we'll be delivering those results, and we'll be sharing those ideas with people in the fullness of time here. But I'll tell you one thing. Let's start with something very basic. One health ministry, one central coordination. Instead of 5 different ministries looking after healthcare, stepping on one another's toes, not knowing how to manage the crisis and emergency rooms. There's a lot more. There's a lot of ways to become more efficient. There's a lot of ways to focus more on the front line, but certainly it's the opposite of the chaos, the cuts, and the corruption that we've seen from the UCP.
Hi, my name is Rajesh Angral from Sabrang Radio, and happy Ramadan to you first.
Ramadan Mubarak.
And my question is recently whatever Darren Smith is doing, she's putting everything on the immigrants and oil. So wherever we can see all the immigrants are doing wonderful jobs in this province, we are building this country as well as Alberta. But a lot of my friends from the immigrant communities, they are very much upset by the announcement she did. Even though a couple of years ago she was asking for more and more immigrants to Justin Trudeau, and now the same Justin Trudeau is culprit for everything what she asked for. So what you will like to say to these immigrants?
Look, this is blaming and this is scapegoat. Even if all these referendum questions pass, and let's be clear, the Premier has the power to institute some of this. Some of it is illegal and unconstitutional, will never be implemented. But we're spending maybe $100 million, maybe more, on a referendum. We're going to have 10 months of anger and division about this until that referendum comes. It's a distraction against everything else that she is doing. But the thing is, it's not going to solve any of the problems. The federal government absolutely took its eye off the ball in the years after COVID. You remember during the pandemic, we had stores not being able to stay open because there were labor shortages. And the government absolutely took their eye off the ball. They overreacted. Everyone has admitted this for 2 or 3 years post-pandemic. The numbers have been brought back down. But those people are already here, and we've got to work them through the system, which is going to take time. And nothing that the Premier is proposing is actually going to help that situation. So that's already happened. That's already been fixed in terms of the numbers of folks coming in. But she's not actually doing anything else to fix it. What she is doing is building anger in division. I'll tell you 2 quick stories from this weekend. The first is that our family had a surprise 85th birthday party for my mom. We had a big fancy party, and we involved a lot of her friends who were in her generation, and a lot of our family, our kids and our grandkids. And I looked around that room, and I looked at Mom's friends, and I realized every one of them, they've been in Canada now 40 or 50 or more years, and every one of them struggled hard when they got here, including my own family. And I looked at their kids, professionals, doctors, lawyers, business people, successful folks in the community, amazing community activists. And I looked at their kids, students really making a change in the world as young people. And my sister said, you should film a video of our family and say, this is immigration, Danielle Smith. This is what happens. But I thought about it, and I thought, don't we have a responsibility to make sure that those who come after have the chance to succeed in the same way, instead of making it harder and harder, instead of telling kids, the temporary foreign workers, that you can't go to school? What the hell is that? How do you build a society that way? Again, she never thinks of the implications. I went to another event this weekend. It's Ramadan now. And I went to an iftar for a charity that does incredible work helping Muslim communities here and around the world. 3 different sets of professionals asking if it was time for their families to leave Alberta. One was a doctor. And she said, in addition to the healthcare system, I'm not comfortable that my kids are safe here anymore. Is that Danielle Smith's goal? Is that what she really wants? If so, she should just come out and tell us.
Thank you.
Our next question goes to phone lines of Sean Lawrence and you, Sean from Orange.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, Sean.
Hi. What is the right level of immigration for Alberta? Because I think most people would agree that there's only so many homes, there's only so many jobs, there's only so many hospitals and schools. So what metrics would you use to try to determine what the right level of immigration is for Alberta, or would you just simply leave that up to the bench?
No, it's really important to get this right. And it's important to note that over the last 10 years, Alberta's population growth has been just south of 2% per year, which is actually a little bit lower than historical norms if I've got my numbers right. So all this talk about this massive inflow over a decade is not true. There were 3 years or 4 years of massive, massive inflow. And it's absolutely true that we weren't ready for that. But it's also something that was caused by the provincial government. They had the Alberta is Calling campaign. The Premier pushed hard to say we want 10 million people, we want to double our population in a short period of time. Even when she was saying it, we all knew that it was unsustainable. And now she's swung the pendulum way, way, way back to very small numbers that will lead to labor shortages. So the answer to the question is, look, we can figure this out. It's not that complicated. She made up a number in her press conference on Friday, which is far, far below historical norms for development. That's too low. But we need to make sure that we're integrating the right number of people that we need to reduce labor shortages, to make sure that we're building our economy and creating jobs. And certainly it's not what the federal government did post-pandemic. It was way too high. But it's certainly also not the low numbers the Premier is now pulling out after pulling out really high ones. Let's talk to the experts and figure this out correctly.
Yeah, so we're going to get a budget this week. It's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 billion, if not worse. I know you're going to point to government waste. I think that's fair. I don't think any Albertan wants a government that will waste their money, but I also don't think there's $10 billion worth of waste to cut out of the budget. So I guess what sort of budget conversation do we need to have here? What is the solution to what's probably going to be a hole in the neighborhood of $10 billion?
Yeah, there's a bunch to unpack there. So first of all, every opposition politician is going to say, cut the waste. But I will tell you that this government has a shocking amount of fraud, waste, corruption, and mismanagement. We can add up billions of dollars in what they've done. Most recently we heard that the cost of the Turkish Tylenol is getting close to $100 million. How many schools can you build for $100 million? We also have a massive infrastructure deficit. So it's important for us to understand that for some time we've got to invest in schools and hospitals. But we also have to make sure that we're not doing this in a stupid way, where it's costing us way too much and taking too much time for us to get this thing built, and then we don't have the actual ability to fund the operating costs of it. So we need a top-to-bottom change in how we're thinking about budgeting and how we manage to eliminate both the fraud and the waste, but also redirect resources towards the front line. A great example of this is we now got 11 CEOs and 11 management bodies to run the healthcare system, where we used to have one. We used to have the lowest management ratio in healthcare in the country. I suspect it's now close to the highest. Those are choices, and we can figure out ways to do a better job. And I'll just ask Albertans, look at my record. 11 straight balanced budgets in the city of Calgary with the lowest house taxes in the country. You can do it, and you can figure out ways to do it smarter and better. Can it be done in 1 year? No. Does there have to be a path to balance? Absolutely. And this government hasn't shown any path to balance. They're basically showing more and more and more deficits. The other thing that I'll remind us of is that for the first time since Peter Naheed, Danielle Smith increased the reliance of our budget on oil and gas royalties. Every other premier has tried to decrease that amount to try to diversify the economy. She increased it. And yes, she's put money in the Heritage Trust Fund. That's a good thing. But she borrowed money to put in the Heritage Trust Fund. So now we have record oil production, the highest it's ever been, $70 a barrel oil, and she can't balance the budget. So we've got to take a real down-to-earth, ground roots approach to rethink the budget and make sure that we're refocusing the spending on the front line.
All right, our next question goes to Will Vasso, Western Standard. Will, watch.
Thanks for taking my question. You speak about denouncing separatism, and I'm just curious, what would be your message to the 1 in 3 Albertans or so, the number varies, who are in favor of independence and have lost faith in Alberta?
Well, the number significantly varies. And look, the argument is that they've lost faith in Ottawa, but have they lost faith in Canada? And I think the question we ask ourselves is, do we cut and run? There are very legitimate concerns that Alberta has always had, that can be dealt with. So do we fix those things, or do we run off? And I ask them this: how successful are resource-rich landlocked countries with no access for their exports to the rest of the world? The folks in charge of the separatism movement want a $500 billion line of credit from the United States. So even if you don't join the United States, you become a vassal of the United States. You owe them all your money. So an independent Alberta is significantly less independent. So I'll continue to make the case for Canada. I'll continue to make the case about how this country, as bruised and messy as it is, works better than almost anywhere in the world. And our job is to make it work even better, not to cut off our nose to spite our face.
Do you have a follow-up, Will?
Yeah, on Saturday, the Premier said that she intends to call for a bipartisan committee on what the next step should be for the Forever Canada petition. Can you clarify what the NDP would like to see happen with that petition, whether it's legislative or referendum vote?
So it's sort of funny that she said she's going to call for a bipartisan committee. She actually has to. It's in the legislation. That's what the legislation says anytime a petition is achieved. So even though she says that if the separatists or the coal mining petition get the signatures, she'll have a referendum, she doesn't have the power to do that. She has to call this committee. They were supposed to call this committee before Christmas, and they whipped out. They didn't know what they were going to do. So they actually were forced to call this committee within the first few sitting days of the legislature. We don't know who's going to be on it or how they're going to set it up, but the committee will then have the right to argue two things, which is when a petition of this type is received, it's about the Forever Canada petition. When that is received, you either have a debate in the legislature on that issue or you have a referendum on that issue. The Premier doesn't understand her own legislation. She has to do that for each of these referenda. And so as a result, we'll have that debate. I happen to believe that more referenda are expensive and divisive, I think that we can stand up in the legislature and every member of the UCP can say whether they believe in Canada or not. Pretty straightforward. We can get it over with pretty quickly.
Right, our next question came from Press, Lisa Johnson, Lisa, why should we?
Oh, thanks for taking my question. I actually wanted to ask about that issue as well. So it sounds like what you're saying is you would prefer, and the members from your party who sit in this committee would prefer to put that policy onto the floor of the legislature than put it to a referendum. Is that what you're saying?
I think Albertans deserve to know where UCP MLAs stand. They refused to sign the pledge, so I want to know which of them is going to vote in favor of Canada. Now, the problem is that this is a mess. It's an expensive, difficult mess, and it's a mess entirely of the UCP's creation. They wrote bad legislation. Thomas Lukaszuk, to his credit, he took advantage of the legislation to create a movement of people in favor of Canada. And now the UCP's kind of stuck. What are they going to do? Because if they give Lukaszuk his referendum and the separatists get enough signatures, you can't have, I suppose they'll change the legislation to allow it, to have two referenda on the same topic. Confusing, expensive, ridiculous. But if they take Lukaszuk to a vote of the legislature, but they let the separatists, who remember, she already changed the rules to make it easier for the separatists. And if they get their signatures, then what's she going to do? How can she treat the two of them differently? So this is a big mess. There's no easy solution to it. It's all of the UCP's making. But at the very least, every Albertan deserves to know where each UCP MLA stands on this. I'm going to just go off topic for a second, Lisa. I'll say one other thing, which is, the Premier is calling for these 9 referenda, and she's already given her opinion on all of those questions. She doesn't care what Albertans think. She already has her point of view. So what the hell is the point of the referendum? The Premier, if you want to force people to show their passport every time they vote, you could change that legislation today, and we could have a debate in the House about it. You already believe in it, so just do it. But for some reason, she just wants the distraction of endless referenda, and they're very expensive, and they're very divisive, and they cause more instability, and they cause companies to not want to invest here and create jobs. And that is Danielle Smith's legacy.
Your follow-up, Lisa?
Just to clarify, I think what you're saying is you would prefer that the Lukaszuk question be put onto the floor of the legislature as a policy debate. But connected to that is that Danielle Smith has been saying that she strongly believes in direct democracy. So if this does not go to a referendum, what does that mean for democracy?
Let's be clear, she believes in direct democracy when she thinks it'll help her. She doesn't care what people think. The Alberta Next panel called for a referendum on the Alberta pension plan. That wasn't on her list of 9 because she knows it would lose miserably. So, you either believe in democracy or you don't. And as my deputy leader, Rajesh Angral, said last week, if you really believe in democracy, the purest form of democracy is call an election. You didn't campaign on any of these things, Danielle Smith. In fact, you campaigned on the opposite of any of them. Call an election today. We're ready.
All right, our next question is all of Alberta, Catherine, and election.
Hi, it's Catherine Falfield, Alberta. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Catherine. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. This is really more of a House leader question, but hopefully you can help me out. On the early.
My last meeting was with the House leader when she said, I need to talk to you about a bunch of things. Which I don't know yet, but I'll try.
The early order paper seems to have quite substantive changes proposed to the standing orders. I know it looks like changes to the way debate can be limited. There's changes to emergency debate rules. Maybe you can't answer this, but I'm wondering what type of conversations the two House leaders have had and how we expect these changes to change how the House runs.
I think this is the first time in 16 years in public life that I'm going to do this in media availability and say, I will connect you with our House leader because I have not yet been briefed on those changes. What I can tell you, though, is that it was very clear at the end of throughout the fall session that the government was increasingly frustrated that they actually have to go through the motions of democracy, that they actually have to listen to the other side. This dates back to Jason Kenney handing out earplugs to his caucus so they didn't have to listen to the opposition. And they've been wanting to do this forever. They've been wanting to limit debate, reduce the ability of the legislature to ask questions or to bring up amendments, reduce the ability for people to bring up emergency debates. They will claim this is about efficiency and red tape reduction. It's just about subverting democracy, which is what they do every day. So I don't know exactly what they're planning, but certainly these are things they've been threatening for as long as I've been in this job.
Yeah, for follow-up, I wondered if you could give me a preview of any type of private members' bills or motions that we could expect.
Yeah, I'll give you a very brief preview. We'll have the opportunity to talk more about that later this week. But I'll give you a very brief preview that we are focused 100% on the things Albertans are focused on. So we have private members' bills related to healthcare, related to grocery bills, related to nuisance fees that people pay, focused on reducing the cost of living for Albertans, as well as some stuff around public education. And I look forward to sharing all of those in the days to come.
Right, our next question is from
Hi, Mr. Nenshi. You talked about revenue roller coaster Alberta's on, and it seems like we're going down the hill right now. So what suggestion would you have to diversify the provincial revenue sources? Would you reverse Smith's tax cut if you were in power? Would you create a small provincial sales tax? Like, how do you go about creating more revenue for the province so that Alberta doesn't do a deficit, in your opinion?
Well, thank you for that question. And let's keep in mind that we are on a roller coaster, but the government made some deliberate policy choices. They actually created a higher roller coaster for the first time since Lockheed. The premier wanted to make it look like she was reducing taxes. She gave us what I call the bag of chips tax cut, a bag of chips a day, which didn't make really any difference to people's lives, because at the same time, they increased the provincial portion of property taxes here in Calgary by 15%. So they're not doing anything rational on the revenue side that any previous government would have been able to balance the budget at $70 a barrel of oil. And the fact that this premier can't do it means she's made the roller coaster even worse. So there's no magic in this. You know, look, Albertans have said over and over and again that they're not interested in provincial sales tax, which means that we have to work within the constraints we're given, but we can make it work. You know, and again, I'll say it, when I was mayor of Calgary, I just had the property tax, nothing else, and user fees like transit fares. And we were able to balance the budget 11 years straight and have the lowest taxes in the country. You can do it. And it's not just a matter of looking at revenue, it's not just a matter of looking at expenses, it's about smart budgeting. And I really believe that we'll be able to get there. We won't be able to do it in 1 year. You know, when we form government, God willing, we will have a deficit that first year because we'll have to clean up the mess of the provincial government. But I have promised, and I will continue to promise, that Albertans will see a path to balance on the operating budget. And they will see that very, very early in our mandate. And we'll figure it out once we inherit whatever mess the UCP has created.
All right. Next question is.
Emmanuel?
Sorry, do you have a follow-up?
Yep. I do. Yeah, so Danielle Smith in her provincial address and following press conference said that there wouldn't be any significant cuts to the public services. You wouldn't take back the pay deal that they had with the teachers, with doctors. Do you believe her that there wouldn't be any cuts in the budget that's going to be tabled?
Well, I mean, listen, there's only 3 levers she's got, right? Her levers are increase taxes, cut services, or run massive deficits, which is the same as increasing taxes. They're just taxes you have to pay in the future with interest. She'll take the wimp's way out. She'll just have a massive deficit and hope no one notices. Someone's got to pay that back. Someone's got to pay that back with interest. And you only pay it back with future taxes and hopefully with economic growth. And there's no plan here for economic growth. So this is going to be an ugly budget and people should watch out. And certainly she's already said she's going to increase the thresholds, the income thresholds for people to apply for public services. So you're going to see a lot more hits to your pocketbook regardless of what she does on taxes.
Our next question is Janet French. Janet, you're watching.
Hi there.
There you are.
Hi, I apologize because I missed quite a bit of the beginning of this due to technical issues. I just want to ask about the upcoming announcement today, whatever it is, in
Yeah.
a couple of hours about record-breaking investments in physicians. How confident are you that this government is going to take some kind of meaningful step to address what we see as bottlenecks across the health system?
Let's see if I can be quite as animated as I was when I answered that question earlier, Jen. I'm happy to answer it again. This is the 9th or 10th record-breaking announcement that they've made, and the healthcare system gets worse and worse and worse. They're going to say there are more doctors in Alberta than there's ever been. What they won't say is that that number includes people who are doing locums only, who've left the province, that are keeping their registration active in the province so they can come back, folks who mostly retired, folks who closed their practices and are working in specialties and so on, and they won't tell you that the number of doctors per capita is significantly down. This is the reality. And they're pretending they've just figured this out, and they're going to throw some money at it. And your question was, do I have any confidence that it'll make a change? No, I have zero confidence. I have zero confidence in Adriana LaGrange. I have zero confidence in Danielle Smith and their ability to make the health system better. It's become so much worse for every Albertan since the UCP took power, and particularly since Danielle Smith broke up AHS. You want more money for health? How about no longer having 11 CEOs and 11 management structures to replace AHS? They, just like with classrooms, they suddenly discovered that classrooms were too big. The Premier actually said that she discovered on Twitter that there were too many immigrants. And now they've suddenly discovered there's not enough doctors. Yeah, they're not going to be able to fix it.
Yeah, I just wanted to focus a little bit more on the triage liaison physician program. It was supposed to start February 1st. Pat Jones had this announcement in January in response to, warnings that doctors were issuing about the conditions in emergency rooms. We still have not seen any of these doctors working in that role, and what we know from the Alberta Medical Association is that they're actually not even talking. There's not even negotiations happening between the AMA and the government on how this role would be brought to life. What do you make of all of this?
That the government has no idea what they're doing. This is the most incompetent government I have ever seen in all my years of looking at governments. They think they can talk and things just happen. But in reality, they made this grand promise in January, and we asked at that time, where are those physicians coming from? How are they getting paid? How is this different than what's happening right now? And by the way, how do you actually treat someone in a waiting room where there's no privacy and no equipment? But yet we were told in only 3 weeks' time, magically, these triage physicians would come and it would solve all the problems. We knew this wasn't going to work. But this government never asked the questions. They never listened to the experts. They never listened to the people on the front lines. I want this program to work. I really do. Because I want people to have faith and confidence that when they go to the ER, they're going to get the care they need. But this government shows no follow-up. They've never been able to fix any problems, and they throw money at things. They're bad at this. They're not just bad at money, they're bad at offering services. So I'm hopeful this will get there. I have faith in the doctors that they'll figure it out, and they'll figure out how to make it work. But I have no faith in the government to be able to achieve these things. They've shown that, they've proven that over and over and over again.
Right, our final question, back to the room.
Hey, it's Kevin again from CQB. Quick question about referenda.
Yes.
We've seen them go sideways from what politicians who seek to have the expected result. I think we saw that in 2018 here in Calgary. I know we saw that when we saw that when David Cameron called one about Brexit. Are you at all worried that should a referendum question about separation end up on the ballot, it could end up where people don't think?
Yes, so the 9 referendum questions that the Premier is putting forth are garbage questions. The constitutional ones require either all provinces to agree or 7 out of 10 provinces with 50% of the population to agree. It will never happen. They're just for show. The other ones are things that are within the province's control and they could just do right now if they really wanted to. So this is all just a distraction. The separation one is much more dangerous. So there are 3 challenges with the separatism referendum. The amount of people in favor of separatism hasn't changed very much over decades. Sort of gone between 20 and 30% over a long, long period of time. And in fact, I saw a recent study that said that in Texas, 31% of people want to separate from the United States. So this is something that exists, always has. But emboldening this is very dangerous. The Premier's strategy has been clear from the very beginning. And there's no strategic genius going on here. We knew what she was going to do. She would come up with this Alberta Next panel with this series of impossible things and say, look, I can fix it, I'm Captain Canada, don't vote for separatists now. It's exactly what David Cameron tried to do in the Brexit referendum. I don't think the Premier writes in the end of the book to see what happened. So there's three big problems here. Number one, referenda are unpredictable. Brexit rarely polled over 30-35% until the referendum happened. And the government was woefully unprepared for the results of that referendum. And as a result, we've had a decade of economic malaise in the United Kingdom. Number two, the time period between now and the referendum is a time of incredible instability. Nobody will invest in Alberta if they don't know what country they're investing in. No one will invest $30 billion in a pipeline if they don't know if the pipeline has to cross an international border. So we're going to see huge, unemployment is way up since Danielle became the Premier, and we're going to see increased problems with jobs in the province. And number three, and I think the most important one, is it's just so divisive. It pits neighbor against neighbor. Social media is even more of a cesspool now than it ever was before because people are so angry at each other. We don't need that. We need to be rowing in the same direction to be building a better economy and a better Alberta. So I'm very nervous about this. I don't think that it would take a politician of very rare skill to be able to manage what Danielle Smith is trying to do and threading the needle here by playing to both sides, by pandering to the separatists while saying she believes in Canada, by using her word salad of she now said an independent Alberta within a united Canada. She said that on Friday, which is different than a sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. A single man within the confines of a marriage. It makes no sense. It's pure word salad. And that single man's not getting what he wants within the confines of his marriage, and neither will Danielle Smith. It would take a politician of rare Alberta ability to pull this off, and while she is a politician of great ability, she's not that good.
I'm going to ask a follow-up, and it's kind of the same question asked a different way, more directly. Are you worried that a referendum on separation might succeed, even though presently 30-ish% of people say they're in favor of it?
I believe it's hugely unlikely, but you cannot actually discount that option. But I'll give you another example of what happens though if it fails. What happens if the referendum fails 70-30? Let's say some of the polls are right, or 75-25. Well, you have a group of people who have been living in an AI-driven, algorithm-driven world where they really believe everyone agrees with them. You can see that on social media today. And if they lose the election, will they lose faith in democracy and elections? We've seen that in the United States. We've seen that in other places. We don't need that here. And this is exactly what the Premier is pushing on. So regardless of the results of the referendum, healing the division and working to build a better Alberta is not going to be easy. And again, this is all the Premier's fault.
All right, and with that concludes our press conference.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone. ਇਹ ਸੀਗੀ ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਸ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੁਣੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਐਨਡੀਪੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੇ ਲੀਡਰ ਨਹੀਦ ਨੈਂਸ਼ੀ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਕਾਫੀ ਵਧੀਆ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਸ ਦੇ ਆਨਸਰ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦੋਸਤ ਵਰਿਡ ਸੀਗੇ ਰਿਗਾਰਡਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਲਾਏ ਗਏ ਬਲੇਮਸ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਕਿਸ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਕਰਦੀ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਨੂੰ ਅਲਬਰਟਾ ਨੂੰ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲੀ ਆਈ ਥਿੰਕ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੁਐਸਚਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਨਸਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿਲ ਗਏ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਥਰੂ ਦਿਸ ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਵੈਰੀ ਮਚ ਐਂਡ ਸੀ ਯੂ ਸੂਨ